The wind wasn't just cold, it was a thief. It stole the last warmth from my bones and the last hope from my heart. My name is Ilara, and I was walking myself to death. Each step was a prayer, each breath a shard of ice in my lungs. My thin cloak was a joke against the winter's fury, but beneath it, beneath my trembling hands, was the only reason my feet still moved: my swollen belly. Inside, two hearts beat against my own, two little lives dancing in a world that had already rejected them. Twins, a blessing, everyone used to whisper, but not for me. For me, it was a death sentence. My own pack, the Silverfang, saw them as a curse, an abomination. Twin births split pack bonds, they said. They bring chaos and death. I can still hear Elder Cal's voice, cold and final as a slamming tomb. You have until moonrise to be gone, Ilara. Take your curse away from us. I had begged. Oh, moon goddess, how I had begged, on my knees in the mud before the entire council, my tears freezing on my cheeks. Please, they're innocent. I have nowhere to go. But they just turned away, one by one. Even my own mother, she couldn't look at me. The shame in her eyes was worse than the cold, the shame of a daughter who believed a mate bond was forever. How foolish I was. My mate, Corvin, his face flashed before my eyes. The joy when I told him I was pregnant, it lasted 3 heartbeats. Then the pack physician announced it was twins. His smile died. His love died. I saw it vanish, replaced by fear. By the time Elder Cal arrived, Corvin had already taken a step back from me. His words were softer than the elders, but they cut deeper. I'm sorry, Ilara. Lyra doesn't carry this burden. I have to think of the pack. Lyra. Beautiful, normal, acceptable Lyra. The rejection of our half-formed mate bond felt like my soul was being shredded by claws. I screamed until the world went black. When I woke 3 days later, it was done. Corvin was mated to Lyra, and I was nothing, a ghost, a curse to be expelled. So I walked, for hours, with no food, no shelter, no destination, just away. My foot caught on a root hidden under the frost-rimed leaves. This time, my body had nothing left to give. I fell hard, throwing my hands out to protect my belly as my shoulder slammed into the frozen earth. Pain, bright and sharp, exploded through me, and then a worse pain, a deep, cramping terror in my womb. No, please, not here, not now, not when I have nothing to give you but my own failing life. I lay gasping, tears mixing with the dirt on my face, waiting for the spasm to pass. Slowly, achingly, I pushed myself up. My hands were raw, my shoes were torn, my feet bloody. I was a skeleton draped in rags, except for the precious, heavy swell of my children. I looked up and my breath caught. I'd reached a border. I could feel the thrum of power in the air, the invisible wall where one territory ends and another begins. But this was different. The scent markers here were ancient, overwhelming. They spoke of absolute power, of a lineage so strong it made my inner wolf whimper and hide. The royal territory, the land of the Alpha King himself. Panic, colder than the wind, seized me. No, I rasped. I can't cross here. But my legs buckled, my arms gave out. I collapsed face first into the leaves again, my cheek pressed against the soil of a king. Above me, the sky was changing. The moon was rising, but it wasn't the gentle silver disk of my memories. This moon, it was rising red, a massive, terrible, breathtaking blood moon, staining the skeletal trees and the snow in crimson light. I'd never seen one. No one alive had. They were myths, omens of great change, of eras ending and beginning. Its light washed over me, and for a single, surreal moment, I felt warm. I felt the babies inside me stir, not in distress, but in unison, as if recognizing a call. Something dormant in my own blood gave a feeble answering pulse, a whisper that this wasn't the end. But that was a lie. That was hope, and hope had been a poison to me. My vision darkened at the edges, the world narrowing to a tunnel of red light and crushing cold. I fought it. For my daughters, I fought to stay awake. But I was so tired. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me whole was that blood-red moon hanging over the king's forest and the shadow of something enormous moving through the trees, coming straight for me. King Cassian felt the pull an hour before the blood moon breached the horizon. It was a physical yank behind his ribs, a silent scream that set his wolf pacing and snarling inside his mind. Something, in the west, something that needed him now. He threw down the border reports, shifting before he was even out the castle doors. His wolf, a giant beast of midnight black fur, hit the ground running. His beta, Rylan, called after him, but a single mental snarl sent the man falling back. This was for him alone. He ran as the red moon rose, painting his fur in shades of old wine, an omen. His grandfather spoke of blood moons. They heralded moments when destiny grabbed the world by the throat. The last one shone when the great packs fractured into war 3 centuries ago. Cassian believed in strength, in strategy, in the solid weight of a crown, not myths, but the power in the air tonight was undeniable. It led him to the western border, where his lands met the pathetic territory of the Silverfang pack, and there, crumpled across the invisible line like a discarded doll, was a woman. Cassian shifted back, his enhanced senses taking her in, small, dangerously thin, except for the pronounced swell of her pregnancy, clothes in tatters, feet bleeding, hair matted with leaves and frozen mud. She was the most shattered, beautiful thing he'd ever seen. The thought stunned him, a physical blow that made him falter. He'd been presented with the strongest, most elegant she-wolves in the kingdom. He'd felt nothing, but this broken stranger, his wolf howled with a recognition so profound it shook him to his core. He knelt, checking for a pulse, faint but there. Hypothermia, exhaustion, starvation. Rage, hot and sudden, burned through him. What pack abandons a pregnant female to the winter? His hand brushed her belly as he gathered her carefully into his arms, and he froze. Not 1 heartbeat, 2, fluttering, bird fast but strong. Twins! She carried twins! Understanding dawned, dark and furious. The Silverfangs in their archaic fear. They cast her out for this? His wolf demanded vengeance, blood, retribution. But the woman in his arms made a small pained sound, and every thought of violence vanished. She was ice cold. He had to get her warm, now. He ran for the castle, her light weight a terrible accusation against his world. With every stride, the pull in his chest tightened, becoming a certainty, a truth he could no longer deny. The blood moon watched him carry her home. By the time his castle spires pierced the horizon, he knew. Mate. This broken Omega was his true mate, the one the moon had chosen for him, and she was carrying 2 lives he would now die to protect. Darkness wasn't empty. It was full of echoes. Echoes of Cal's cold decree, of Corvin's retreating back, of my mother's averted eyes. I floated in them, a ghost in my own life. Then a new sensation seeped in. Warmth, not the fierce, stealing warmth of a fire, but a deep, gentle heat that seemed to come from within the very bed I was laying upon. The scent was next, not pine and snow, but clean linen, faint herbs, and something else, something wild and potent like a forest at dawn, yet safe, secure. My eyelids were heavy, crusted with old tears. I forced them open. The world was a blur of soft gold light. A high, vaulted ceiling of dark stones swummed into focus. I was in a bed large enough for 5 people, buried under covers of impossibly soft fur and velvet. Panic, my old companion, shot through me. Where was I? I tried to sit up and a wave of dizziness slammed me back down. My hands flew to my belly. Still there, still round, still holding my 2 secret hearts. I could feel them, safe, sleeping. The door opened silently. A man entered. No, not a man. A king. I knew it instantly, in the way my wolf, usually so cowed and silent, whimpered and tried to press itself into the ground in submission. He was tall, with shoulders that seemed to fill the doorway, and hair the color of polished obsidian. His eyes, they were the gold of a predator at sunset. He moved with a lethal grace that spoke of absolute power, held in careful check. He saw I was awake and stopped. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. And then it happened. A cord, invisible but stronger than steel, snapped between our chests. It was a connection, a recognition, a completion so shocking it stole the air from my lungs. I felt his presence in my mind, not as words, but as a steady, powerful warmth, like standing in sunlight after a lifetime of cold. A mate bond, a true mate bond. But that was impossible. I was cursed, broken. No. The word was a ragged whisper torn from my throat. I scrambled backward on the bed, the luxurious fabrics tangling around my legs. Please, don't hurt them. I'll go. I'll disappear. Just please let my babies live. My voice broke on a sob. I was so tired of begging. But for them, I would beg until my voice gave out. He was across the room in a heartbeat, but he didn't touch me. He knelt beside the bed, bringing himself to my eye level, his powerful frame making the gesture one of stunning humility. "No one will hurt you here," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the new bond and into my bones. It wasn't a promise, it was a law. You and the lives you carry are under my protection. I swear this on my crown and on my life. I stared into those golden eyes, looking for the lie, the pity, the disgust. I found only a fierce, unwavering certainty. "You don't understand," I choked out, the old shame rising like bile. "They're twins. They're cursed. My pack, they said—" "Your pack are fools ruled by fear," he said, the words cutting and final. "There is no curse, only fear of what is different, what is powerful." His gaze dropped to my belly, and his expression did something incredible. It softened. The fierce king vanished, replaced by a look of such profound wonder it made my heart ache. Twins are a rare blessing, a sign of great strength. "Who are you?" I breathed, still trapped in the storm of his presence and the humming new bond. "I am Cassian, Alpha King of the Silverfall Kingdom, and you are my true mate. The moon has woven our souls together." The world spun. Alpha King, true mate. It was a cruel joke, a beautiful, impossible dream that would shatter and cut me when I woke. "This can't be real," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "It is the most real thing that has ever happened to me," Cassian said. He reached out, slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. His fingertips, calloused and warm, brushed a strand of tangled hair from my face. The touch sent a jolt through me, not of fear, but of a connection so deep it was terrifying. "Rest now, Ilara. You are safe. This is your home." He stood then, that mantle of kingship settling back over him. "The royal physician, Celine, will be in to check on you and the little ones. You need to eat to regain your strength." He paused at the door, looking back at me, and in his eyes I saw not just a king, but a man who had found something he thought he'd never have. "No one will ever cast you out again." He left, and I was alone with the silence and the impossible truth. A king, my mate. My mind reeled, but my body, for the first time in months, felt truly warm. My babies stirred gently, as if soothed by the potent, safe scent of pine and power that now filled the room. Cassian. I tested the name in my mind. It felt foreign, heavy, like a crown placed on the head of a beggar. What did it mean? What horrible new game was fate playing with me? The fear began to creep back in, colder than the winter outside. What would a kingdom say when their king's chosen mate was a scarred, pregnant Omega carrying the very thing most wolves feared? The safety of these stone walls felt fragile. A gilded cage was still a cage, and I had just been placed squarely in the center of a throne room I never wanted, with a crown of thorns and starlight waiting to be placed upon my head. The next few days passed in a haze of soft voices, healing magic, and overwhelming kindness. Celine, the physician, was a kind-eyed woman whose hands glowed with a gentle light as she tended to my frostbite and malnutrition. "The babies are remarkable," she'd murmur, her magic probing gently. "So strong despite everything. They have their mother's will to live." Cassian was a constant, unsettling presence. He didn't smother me, but he was always there. He brought my meals himself, ignoring the startled looks from servants. He had me moved to a suite of rooms adjacent to his own in the royal wing. The most secure part of the castle, he'd stated, leaving no room for argument. He would sit in silence as I ate, his gaze often dropping to my belly with that same look of awe. My wolf, for so long a trembling shadow, began to uncurl. In his presence, she didn't feel the need to hide. She felt curious, drawn to him. The mate bond hummed between us, a live wire of potential that both comforted and terrified me. How could this be? Corvin's rejection had scarred my very soul. To have the moon goddess herself declare a new bond, and with a king? It felt like a setup for a devastating fall. On the 5th day, feeling stronger, I ventured into the private gardens attached to my rooms. The winter sun was weak but welcome. I sat on a stone bench, my hands resting on the life within me, trying to make sense of it all. "So you're the one who finally caught my brother's eye." The voice was feminine, laced with amusement and curiosity. I turned to see a woman walking towards me. She had Cassian's dark hair and golden eyes, but her features were sharper, her smile quicker. She moved with an innate elegance. "I didn't catch anything," I said automatically, my old defensiveness rising. "I was dying on his border." She laughed, a bright, clear sound. "Yes, he told me. Dramatic entrance. I'm Lysandra, his sister, and you must be Ilara." She sat beside me without invitation, her eyes dropping to my belly. "And these are the famous twins. May I?" Hesitantly, I nodded. She placed a gentle hand over mine on my stomach. Her eyes widened slightly. "Oh my, the power! Cassian said they were strong, but this—" She looked at me with new respect. "You have been carrying this all on your own?" "I didn't have a choice," I mumbled. "Well, you have choices now," Lysandra said firmly, starting with not listening to the old bats on the council who are currently having kittens because my brother has claimed an Omega as his mate. The council, a new layer of dread settled over me. They're angry? Furious and scared. Change terrifies people who profit from the old ways. Her expression turned serious. Lord Varen and Lady Drusilla are the ringleaders. They've been pushing for Cassian to mate with Lady Celeste, a pure-blooded alpha female from a powerful allied pack. You, my dear, have ruined a great many political plans. I felt the walls of the beautiful garden close in. I should go. I'm causing him nothing but trouble. "Don't you dare!" Lysandra gripped my hand. Her strength was surprising. "Cassian has been alone and drowning in duty for years. He's never looked at another female. Until you. What you'd see as trouble, he sees as salvation. And as for the council," a wicked glint entered her eyes, "they need to be reminded who holds the real power in this kingdom." Just then, Cassian appeared carrying a tray. He nodded to Lysandra. "Lysandra, I see you've introduced yourself." Someone had to welcome her properly. Lysandra winked at me. "We'll talk more later, sister." After she left, Cassian set the tray down. "She's right about the council," he said, his voice tight. "But their opinions are irrelevant." "How can a king's counsel be irrelevant?" I asked, picking at a piece of fruit. "Because a king who was swayed by every whisper is no king at all," he said, sitting beside me. His proximity sent the usual jolt through the bond. "My duty is to the kingdom's safety and prosperity. You and these babies," he gestured to my belly, "you are part of that prosperity, a new beginning. They fear that." "They fear me," I corrected quietly. He turned to face me fully, his golden eyes intense. "Then they are fools. You have survived what would break most warriors. You have a strength in you, Alara, that has nothing to do with Alpha or Omega. It is the strength of heart, of love. That is what this kingdom has been missing. He reached out, his hand hovering near my cheek before he seemed to think better of it, and lowered it. I will not let their fear touch you, but I need you to trust me. I need you to stay. The word hung between us. Stay. Not as a guest, but as his mate, as a queen. The magnitude of it was paralyzing. I looked down at my hands, at the swell of my daughters. They deserved safety, a home, a father who looked at them with wonder, not fear. Cassian offered all that, but the cost was a life under a microscope, a life of danger and politics I could never understand. I'm scared, I admitted, the truest words I'd spoken to him. I know, he said, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. So am I, but we can be scared together. Let me prove to you that this is real, that we are real. He didn't wait for an answer. He simply rose, pressed the tray closer to me. Eat, regain your strength, you'll need it. As he walked away, he paused. And Alara, the nursery is being prepared, in the royal wing. I thought you might want to see the designs later. He was already planning for them, for a future. My throat closed with an emotion too tangled to name. Hope, terror, gratitude, dread. It was all there. As I sat in the winter sun, the scent of his power lingering in the air, I realized the battle wasn't over. I had escaped the cold of exile only to find myself in the far more dangerous warmth of a king's heart and a kingdom on the brink. The whispers in the halls were growing louder, and soon they wouldn't be whispers anymore. The nursery was a dream made of wood and light. Cassian showed it to me a week later, a half-finished space full of promise. 2 beautiful cribs stood near a sunlit window. Lysandra helped with the colors, he said, uncharacteristically hesitant. I wanted it to be ready for when they come. Tears pricked my eyes. No one had ever prepared for my children before. They had only been prepared against. It's beautiful, I whispered, my hand resting on the smooth wood of a crib. Thank you. He stood close behind me, not touching, but the heat of him was a tangible force. Have you thought of names? He asked, softly. The question was so intimate, so parental, it stole my breath. I have names. I'd whispered them in the dark for months. Nova, I said, the name slipping out before I could guard it, for the one who feels like a bursting star, always moving, and Celine, for her sister who was quieter but steady like moonlight. Nova and Celine, he repeated, and the way he said them with such reverence carved a new place in my heart. They're perfect. For a moment, standing in that sunlit room surrounded by the evidence of his commitment, I let myself believe. I let the mate bond sing without the chorus of my doubts. It felt like coming home. The illusion shattered 2 days later. I was walking back from the library, a book on kingdom history in my hand, my feeble attempt to understand the world I'd been thrust into. The corridor was quiet, lined with tapestries depicting old battles. A servant rounded the corner, head bowed, a tray in hand. As she passed, her head snapped up. It wasn't a servant. It was a woman with cold, hard eyes I'd recognized from Lysandra's description, Lady Drusilla. Cursed creature, she hissed, and her hand flashed, not a tray, but a silver dagger, aimed straight at my heart. My Omega wolf, the one I thought was weak, exploded to the surface with a mother's fury. I twisted, throwing myself against the wall. The blade meant for my heart sunk deep into my shoulder instead. Agony, white-hot and poisonous, bloomed. Silver. A scream tore from my throat, part pain, part rage. You think you can steal a throne? She snarled, wrenching the blade free for another strike. Your mongrel pups will never rule. I couldn't shift. The silver was a fire in my blood, paralyzing my wolf. But I didn't need to. I was a mother defending her den.
As she lunged again, I didn't flinch back. I stepped into the blow, grabbing her wrist with both hands. The force knocked us both off balance. We crashed to the floor, a tangle of skirts and fury. I saw nothing but her hate-filled eyes. I felt nothing but the driving need to survive, to protect Nova and Celine. I slammed her hand, the one holding the dagger, against the stone floor. Once, twice. Bones crunched. She shrieked, and the blade skittered away. Then a roar filled the corridor, a sound of pure primal wrath. Cassian! He was there, in his human form, moving faster than sight. He didn't bother with the dagger. His hand closed around Lady Drusilla's throat, and he lifted her off me, slamming her against the opposite wall so hard the tapestry rod shattered. Her eyes bulged, her feet kicking uselessly. "Who sent you?" His voice was the grinding of continental plates, deadly calm. She gasped, a frothing, hateful sound. "The true blood will never bow." He snapped her neck. The sound was crisp, final. He dropped her body like rubbish and was at my side in an instant. "Ilara, the silver, how deep?" "Shoulder," I gritted out, clutching the wound. The world was starting to swim, the poison spreading. "The babies?" His hands were on my belly, his power, his alpha energy washing over me. It didn't heal the silver burn, but it soothed the frantic kicking inside. "They're strong. They're fighting it." He lifted me gently, cradling me against his chest. "Celine!" He bellowed, his voice echoing through the castle. Chaos erupted. Guards poured into the hallway. Lysandra appeared, her face pale. Drusilla? I knew she was bitter, but this? This was an assassination attempt, Cassian growled, striding towards the infirmary. She wasn't working alone. Find Lord Varen. Detain the entire council. No one leaves the castle grounds. In the infirmary, Celine worked quickly, her healing magic pulling the silver fragments from my wound. The pain was excruciating, but I clenched my teeth, my hands pressed to my belly, whispering to my girls. Cassian never left my side. He held my other hand, his grip almost painfully tight, his energy a constant stabilizing force against the poison and the panic. "The silver was meant for your heart," Celine said grimly as she finished. "A quick kill. They weren't taking chances. You were very lucky, my lady." "It wasn't luck," I said, my voice hoarse. I looked at Cassian. She called them mongrel pups. She said the true blood would never bow. Cassian's expression turned to carved stone. "This is about the twins and about you being Omega-born. They see your arrival and the children you carry as the end of their old power." He leaned close, his forehead nearly touching mine. The mate bond thrummed with his fury and his fear. "This changes nothing, Ilara. It only makes me more determined. They have shown their hand, now I will break it." "But Lord Varen, the other council members, if the whole council is against you, then I will have a new council," he said simply, as if discussing the weather. "A kingdom cannot have two hearts. Its heart is the alpha, and my heart," his gaze dropped to my belly, then back to my eyes. "My heart is here, with you. They will learn, or they will fall."
The conviction in his voice was absolute. The attack should have made me run. Instead, it forged something new inside me, a cold, hard resolve. They hadn't just attacked a queen, they had attacked a mother, and they had failed. As Celine bandaged my shoulder, the fear began to melt away, replaced by a simmering anger. Cassian was ready to tear down the old world to protect us. Maybe it was time I stopped being the victim waiting to be protected. Maybe it was time the cursed Omega showed them what a mother's love and a queen's wrath truly looked like. The unseen enemy was unseen no more, and the war for our future had just begun. The castle became an armed camp. Lord Varen was found in his chambers, packing. He claimed ignorance, but the evidence, a coded message agreeing to remove the obstacle found in Drusilla's room, was enough for Cassian. Varen was stripped of his title and imprisoned in the dungeons, awaiting formal judgment. The other council members were questioned, released, but watched. A tense, brittle peace settled over the stronghold. My shoulder healed thanks to Celine's magic, but something else had been awakened that wouldn't so easily be soothed. The meek, cowering Omega was gone. In her place was a woman who had looked death in the face and fought back. Cassian saw the change. He didn't coddle me. Instead, he began including me. He showed me maps of the kingdom, explained the alliances and grudges between the great packs. He had a small, elegant desk placed in his study next to his massive one. "If you are to be my queen," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument, "you should know what you are queen of." It was overwhelming, but for the first time, I felt like I had a purpose beyond just surviving. I was learning to protect my children's future. Nova and Celine grew stronger, their kicks more pronounced, often reacting to the sound of Cassian's voice. He would talk to them through my belly, telling them about the kingdom, about the mountains and rivers they would one day rule. The love in his voice was undisguised. It chipped away at the last of my walls. 3 weeks after the attack, the storm we had been waiting for finally broke. Cassian was in a council meeting with the remaining loyal lords. I was in our shared sitting room, practicing the elegant, looping script of the royal language, when the doors burst open. Not Cassian. Lysandra, her face etched with rare fear, and Ryland, Cassian's beta, his expression grim. "Ilara, you need to come with me now," Lysandra said, already gathering a cloak. "What happened?" Ryland answered, his voice tight. "A delegation from the Ironwood and Stormcrest packs arrived at the gates. They're not alone. They have warriors. They've delivered an ultimatum." My blood turned to ice. "What ultimatum?" Lysandra knit my eyes, her own filled with fury and pity. "They say the mating is invalid, that an Omega, especially one carrying a cursed double-born curse, cannot be queen. They demand Cassian renounce you and the twins publicly. They give him 3 days. If he does not, they will unite with other rebel packs and march on Silverfall. They call it a cleansing." The floor seemed to drop away. This was worse than a lone assassin. This was war. "Where is Cassian?" "He's meeting with their ambassadors in the throne room," Ryland said. "He ordered me to bring you to the high tower chambers. They're the most defensible. You'll be safe there until this is resolved." Resolved, the word hung in the air. Resolved could mean my exile, or my death, or the death of everyone in this castle fighting for me. "No," I heard myself say. The word was quiet but firm. Lysandra and Ryland stared at me. "Ilara, this is not the time for stubbornness," Lysandra pleaded. "These are alphas, battle-hardened. They won't listen to reason." "I am not going to hide in a tower while Cassian faces a war meant for me," I said, standing. My belly was large now, my balance different, but I felt a steadiness I'd never known. "Take me to the throne room." "His Majesty expressly forbade," Ryland began. "I am his mate," and I cut in, and for the first time, I said the words with the weight they deserved. The mate bond surged between us, a pulse of undeniable authority that made both Ryland and Lysandra blink. "And I am the mother of his heirs. This threat is against my family. I will face it." A look of reluctant respect crossed Ryland's face. Lysandra, after a moment, gave a sharp nod. "Then we face it together. But for the moon's sake, let's at least make you look like you mean it." She straightened my simple dress, pulled my hair back from my face. "There, you don't look like a victim. You look like a queen who's been interrupted." We moved through the castle corridors, a small, determined procession. As we neared the great doors of the throne room, I could hear the raised voices from within. "An affront on nature and tradition," a harsh, unfamiliar voice boomed. "Your sentimentality will destroy this kingdom, Cassian." "My mate is not sentimentality. She is my destiny, and my children are our future. Your traditions are built on fear. I am building on strength." I pushed the doors open. The scene inside was tense. Cassian stood before his throne, radiating controlled power. Before him stood 2 alpha males dressed for war, flanked by 6 formidable warriors. The loyal council members stood off to the side, watching nervously. All heads turned as I entered. The lead ambassador, a grizzled wolf with a scar across his cheek, looked me up and down, his lip curling in undisguisable disgust. "So this is the cursed Omega. I can smell the weakness from here." A growl started deep in Cassian's chest, but I spoke first. I walked forward, not to Cassian's side, but to a point between them, forcing them to look at me.
You speak of curses and weakness, I said, my voice clear and carrying in the vast room. Yet I see before me wolves so afraid of the future they'd rather start a war than see it change. What does that say of your strength? The ambassador's eyes narrowed. You dare speak to me, female? You are nothing, a burden your king is too blind to shed. I felt Cassian move to step forward, but I held up a hand, a slight gesture. To my amazement, he stopped. The mate bond flared with his protective fury, but also with a thread of trust. I am Ilara, I said, taking another step closer. I placed my hands on my belly. I carry Nova and Selene, the daughters of your Alpha King. They are not a curse. They are a promise that the old ways of fear and exclusion are over. You have delivered your ultimatum. Now hear mine. A stunned silence fell. Even Cassian looked at me, his golden eyes blazing with intensity. I looked the scarred ambassador dead in the eye. You have 3 days. 3 days to take your warriors and your fear and return to your packs. 3 days to remember your oath of loyalty to the crown. If you choose war instead, I let my voice drop, letting the maternal ferocity I discovered fill it. Then you will learn what true weakness is. You will learn what happens when you threaten a mother's children and a queen's wrath. Now get out of my hall.
For a long moment, no one moved. The ambassador looked from me to Cassian, whose expression was now one of fierce, proud agreement, back to me. He saw no fear in my eyes, only iron resolve. He saw a king who backed his mate completely. He saw not a weak Omega, but a Luna in her own right. Without another word, he turned on his heel. His warriors followed. The throne room doors closed behind them with a heavy, final sound. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Cassian crossed the space between us. He didn't embrace me. He simply took my hand, raised it to his lips, and pressed a kiss to my knuckles. It was a gesture of fealty, of recognition. "Your first royal decree," he murmured, just for me, and it was perfect. The loyal council members began to murmur, some in shock, some in dawning respect. The threat wasn't gone. War still loomed on the horizon, but in that moment, a line had been drawn, not by the king alone, but by the queen beside him. The cursed Omega had just declared herself, and the kingdom would never be the same. The 3 days passed like a slow, creeping frost. The castle, which had begun to feel like a sanctuary, transformed into a fortress buzzing with grim purpose. The silence from the rebel packs was more ominous than any threat. Cassian spent every waking hour in the war room with Rylan and his generals, their voices a low, constant rumble through the stone. Maps were marked, messengers came and went at a frantic pace, and the air grew thick with the scent of anxiety and steel. I refused to be sidelined. The fire lit in the throne room wouldn't let me retreat to needlework and gentle concerns. With Lysandra as my fierce tutor and Selene constantly fussing over my health, I immersed myself in the reality of our situation. I learned the names of the rebel alphas, Brannock of Ironwood, with his reputation for brutal efficiency, and Kalen of Stormcrest, a strategic mastermind who hid cruelty behind cold intellect. I memorized the locations of their mustering forces, the strengths of their alliances. It was no longer abstract politics. It was the roadmap of the threat coming to kill my mate and my unborn children. Cassian would find me late at night in his study, my head bent over reports, my hand resting on my belly where Nova and Selene slept. He never told me to stop. He would simply place a goblet of warm milk beside me, his hand lingering on my shoulder, a brief, solid point of contact that sent calm through the bond. "You should rest," he'd say, his voice rough with exhaustion. "So should you," I'd reply, meeting his tired eyes. Knowing is better than not knowing. Fear of the unknown almost broke me once. I won't let it again. On the evening of the 3rd day, the news we dreaded arrived. A bloodied scout stumbled into the courtyard. The rebel packs had not dispersed. They had united with 2 more, the Shadowmoor and the Frostfang. An army of 5 packs was marching.
They would be at the foothills of the Silverfall Mountains by dawn. The war council that night was a somber affair. I sat at Cassian's right hand, my presence still causing uneasy glances from some of the older warriors, but no one dared question it now. The numbers were against us. Cassian's loyal forces were strong, but the rebellion had gathered like a poison-tipped thorn. "We hold the castle," General Torrin stated, a grizzled veteran. "The walls have never been breached. We can withstand a siege for months." "A siege they expect," Rylan countered. "They'll try to starve us, demoralize us, and every day we're trapped inside is a day their cause gains sympathy among the neutral packs." Cassian listened, his gaze fixed on the map. "A siege plays to their narrative," he said finally, "that I am a king hiding behind stone, protecting an aberration. It makes us look weak, afraid." He looked at me, his eyes reflecting the candlelight. Strength must be met with strength, but not blind strength, clever strength. An idea, fragile and terrifying, began to form in my mind. It came from a place deeper than strategy, from the instinct that helped me survive the wilderness. "They're united by one thing," I said quietly. All eyes turned to me. "Fear. Fear of the twins. Fear of change. What if we used that?" Cassian leaned forward. "Explain." My heart hammered against my ribs. "They call my daughters a curse, an aberration. They spread lies about their power being destructive. What if we showed the kingdom something else? Not from behind walls, but openly." I took a breath, placing my hands on my belly. The prophecy of twins is old, and like all old stories, it has many versions. Celine told me some ancient texts speak of twin-born heirs as healers, unifiers. Their combined power is meant to mend, not break. Lysandra, who had been silent, caught on instantly. "A spectacle. You want to force a different vision into their heads." "The army is camped in the Moonstone Valley," I said, pointing to the map. "It's a wide basin, surrounded by slopes where our archers could hold position. If we were to go to them, to meet them there before they reach the castle, not with our whole army arrayed for battle, but with a guard, with me, with the evidence of the curse plain for all to see." General Torrin looked aghast. "You propose taking the king and his pregnant mate into the heart of the enemy army? It's suicide. They'll cut you down before you speak a word." "Will they?" Cassian's voice was thoughtful. He was staring at me as if seeing a new constellation. "They are alphas, bound by certain codes. To attack a visibly pregnant female, the king's claimed mate without provocation, in front of a gathered host, it would shatter their image as righteous liberators. It would make them look like butchers. Some of their followers might balk." He stood, pacing. "It's a gamble of unimaginable risk." "It's the only move they won't expect," I said, holding his gaze. "They believe their own propaganda. They believe Alara is weak. They believe the bond between us is a king's foolish whim. They have no idea of the strength that truly stands beside me." He walked to me, placing a hand over mine on my belly. "We go to the Moonstone Valley at first light. We show the kingdom what their future truly looks like, and we let the rebels show their true colors to everyone watching." The decision was made. The plan was madness. But as the council disbanded to make preparations, a strange calm settled over me. This was no longer about hiding or surviving. It was about fighting for the world I wanted for Nova and Celine, a world where they wouldn't have to apologize for existing. We would either build that world tomorrow, or we would fall together trying. The gathering storm was here, and we would not wait for it to break over our walls. We would walk straight into its eye. Dawn arrived clothed in shades of iron and blood. I stood on the battlements, wrapped in a heavy velvet cloak the color of midnight, embroidered with the silver crescent moon of the royal house. Beneath it, my simple dress stretched tight over my belly. Cassian was at my side, clad not in ornate armor, but functional, polished steel that gleamed dully in the gray light. He looked less like a king on a throne and more like a warrior at the dawn of creation. Our party was small, 50 of his most elite guards, Rylan and Lysandra, and Celine, who refused to be left behind. "If this goes wrong, you'll need a healer," she'd said stubbornly. We rode out not with the roar of an army, but in a tense, purposeful silence. The path to Moonstone Valley wound through the mountains, the air growing colder as we descended toward the vast, mist-shrouded basin.
From the high pass, we saw them. The rebel army was a dark stain on the pale valley floor, thousands strong. Tents dotted the landscape like poisonous mushrooms. Banners of ironwood, stormcrest, shadowmoor, and frostfang snapped in the wind. It was a sight meant to inspire terror. My courage faltered. Nova kicked hard, a spike of alarm. Cassian's hand found mine on my saddle horn, his warmth and steady confidence flowing through the bond. We are together, the bond seemed to pulse. That is our strength. We rolled down the slope, our small group a stark, deliberate contrast to the sea of hostility before us. As we reached the valley floor, a ripple went through the rebel camp. Warriors emerged from tents, forming rough lines. The 4 rebel alphas walked out to meet us, surrounded by their own champions. We halted 100 paces from their front line. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sigh of the wind and the nervous stamp of a horse. Brannick of Ironwood, a mountain of a man with a braided red beard, stepped forward. "Cassian, have you come to surrender your witch and beg for mercy?" Cassian dismounted, then helped me down with infinite care. He kept my hand in his as we took a few steps forward. Rylan, Lysandra, and the guards formed a protective half-circle behind us. "I have come to show you the face of the future you are so eager to destroy," Cassian said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the distance, "and to give you one last chance to lay down your arms and swear fealty." Kaelin of Stormcrest, slender and sharp-featured, let out a cold laugh. "You bring the curse-bearer herself to the battlefield? Is this a joke, or has your mind finally broken?" I let go of Cassian's hand and took one more step forward. The movement drew every eye. I could feel their hatred, their disgust, their fear like a physical pressure. I drew back my hood. A murmur ran through the rebel ranks. I knew what they saw. Not a monster, not a powerful alpha female. A young woman, pale and tired-looking, heavy with child, the very picture of vulnerability. "I am Alara," I said, my voice clear and steady, pitched to carry. "I am Omega-born, and I carry the king's twin daughters, Nova and Selene." I placed both hands on my belly. "You are here because you have been told they are a curse, that they will destroy our world. I am here to ask you, look at me. Do I look like destruction?" I saw hesitation in some of the younger warriors' eyes. This wasn't the demon they'd been promised. Brannick snarled, "Pretty words from a pretty face. The curse is in their blood, not their appearance. Twins are an abomination that splits pack magic. They are unstable. They will be your downfall, Cassian." "You speak of old wives' tales and superstition," Cassian countered, his tone dismissive. "You fear their power because you do not understand it. Their power is not to split, but to unite, to strengthen." "Prove it," shouted a voice from the Stormcrest ranks. "If they're not a curse, prove their power." It was the challenge I'd both hoped for and dreaded. Cassian tensed beside me. We had no proof. We had only faith. But then Selene stepped forward from our group. She walked calmly to my side. "The proof is in their life," Selene said, her healer's voice ringing with authority. "Despite exile, starvation, and a silver blade meant for their mother's heart, these babies thrive. Their heartbeats are the strongest I have ever felt. That is not the mark of a curse. It is the mark of a miraculous will, a will to live and to lead. You claim to fight for the purity and strength of our kind, yet you would slaughter 2 innocent pups and their mother in the womb. What strength is there in that? What honor?" Her words sowed a visible discord. Some warriors looked at their feet. The rebel alphas saw their narrative crumbling. Brannick's face purpled with rage. He had lost the moment of moral high ground. "Enough! This is a trick,
a manipulation. Warriors of the true blood, the king is bewitched. The kingdom must be cleansed. He drew his massive axe. Take them. Kill the Omega and her spawn. But his order met with a fractured response. Only his own Ironwood warriors surged forward immediately. The others, Stormcrest, Shadowmoor, Frostfang, hesitated, their lines wavering. It was the opening we needed, but not the victory we'd hoped for. Battle was here. Guards, protect the queen, Cassian warred, shifting in a blur of motion. His massive black wolf form stood between me and the charging Ironwood line. Rylan and our guards shifted, forming a bristling wall of fur and fangs around Celine, Lysandra, and me. The valley erupted into chaos, but it was not the full-scale battle we feared. It was a fragmented, confused skirmish. Ironwood warriors clashed with Cassian's guards, while the other rebel packs held back, watching, their alphas screaming at them to advance. I was pushed back towards the slope, protected by a ring of loyal wolves. From my slightly higher vantage, I watched Cassian fight. He was a force of nature, tearing through Ironwood soldiers, his focus always swinging back to ensure my safety. But Brannick, in his own huge bear-like wolf form, was pushing towards him, his target clear, Cassian. And then I saw Kalen of Stormcrest. He hadn't shifted. He stood with his own guards watching, but his cold eyes weren't on Cassian. They were on me. He saw the division. He saw the weakened guard around me as Cassian's focus was pulled into the fight with Brannick. A calculating, cruel smile touched his lips. He gave a subtle signal. A dozen Stormcrest warriors, who had been hanging back, suddenly broke from their pack and began to move with deadly purpose around the flank of the fighting. They weren't heading for the main clash. They were carving a straight path towards me. My breath caught. This was his plan all along. Let Brannick be the blunt instrument, the distraction. While Cassian was occupied, Kalen would deliver the killing blow he believed would end the war instantly. He would slaughter the curse at its source.
The guard around me tightened, sensing the new threat. Lysandra shifted into a sleek silver wolf, snarling at the approaching Stormcrest warriors. But we were outnumbered. The real battle for the future wasn't happening in the center of the valley. It was rushing toward the slope where I stood, with the lives of my daughters in the balance. The Valley of Truth had revealed one undeniable fact. Our enemy was more cunning and more ruthless than we had imagined, and he was seconds away. Time slowed. The roar of battle faded into a muffled thunder. All I could see were the cold, determined eyes of the Stormcrest warriors closing in. Lysandra and 5 of Cassian's guards formed a tight, snarling circle around Celine and me. But the Stormcrest wolves were fresh, numerous, and driven by their alpha's calculated command. "Get her to the horses," Rylan's voice barked in my mind, through the pack link, strained as he fought elsewhere. But there was no path to the horses. We were pinned against the rocky slope. Celine gripped my arm, her healer's hands glowing faintly, not with healing magic, but with a defensive energy. "Stay behind me, Ilara." It was a kind but futile gesture. I was the target. My death was the objective. As the first Stormcrest wolf lunged, breaking through our outer guard, a clarity colder than the mountain air settled over me. This was it, the moment I had been walking towards since my exile. Not as a victim, not as a pawn, but as a mother. The instinct that had helped me survive the wilderness, that had let me fight off Drusilla, exploded from a spark into a supernova. I didn't think, I acted. I stepped in front of Celine, pushing her behind me. The charging wolf, a brindled beast with slavering jaws, was aiming for my throat. I didn't have a wolf's speed or fangs, but I had a mother's rage, and a body that was the only shield my daughters had. As he leaped, I dropped my weight and sidestepped, the movement awkward but just enough. His jaws snapped shut on empty air where my shoulder had been. The momentum carried him past me, and I brought my arm down, not with shifter strength, but with the full,
desperate weight of my body, elbow driving into the sensitive spot behind his ear where his skull met his spine. It was no warrior move to use. It was inelegant, brutal, and born of pure survival. The wolf yelped, stunned, crashing to the ground. I didn't stop. I grabbed a rock from the slope, a sharp, heavy piece of granite, and before he could rise, I brought it down. The sound was sickening. He went still. Silence, shock radiated from the Stormcrest wolves for a heartbeat. They had expected a screaming, cowering female. They had not expected a bloodied woman standing over one of their own, her eyes blazing with a feral light, her hands steady. It broke their charge for a crucial moment. That moment was all Lysandra and the guards needed. With fierce cries, they tore into the hesitating Stormcrest line, fighting with renewed fury. But Kalen, from his safe distance, saw everything. His calculating eyes narrowed. He didn't see a fluke. He saw a problem. He shifted then, his wolf form a sleek, gray menace. He didn't join the general fray. He began moving with liquid grace through the fighting, a shark homing in on the scent of blood. His path was unmistakable. He was coming for me himself. I saw him coming. Our eyes met across the chaos. In his, I saw the chilling truth. This was no longer about superstition or politics. This was personal. I had humiliated his plan. I had defied the narrative of weakness. I had to be erased. My bravery wavered. I was just a woman with a rock. He was an alpha, a seasoned killer. I backed up a step, my hand flying to my belly. I'm sorry, my loves. I tried. Then a black thunderbolt intercepted the gray streak. Cassian. He had seen. He had broken from his duel with Brannock, leaving the Ironwood Alpha wounded but alive, to cross the distance between us. He collided with Kalen in midair, a collision of titans that sent a shockwave through the ground. They rolled, a whirlwind of black and gray fur, snarls, and the terrible sound of ripping flesh. It was a fight of a different caliber, alpha against alpha, fury against cold cunning. Cassian fought with the wild, protective rage of a mate and a father. Kalen fought with the precise, vicious efficiency of an assassin. I could only watch, helpless, my heart in my throat. Every slash of Kalen's claws across Cassian's flank, I flinched. Every snap of Cassian's jaws that missed Kalen's throat by a hair, I gasped. The tide of the smaller battle around us shifted. Seeing their king in a death match, Cassian's guards fought like demons. The Stormcrest flanking force was being pushed back, cut down, but the central fight between the alphas was all that mattered. Cassian was bigger, stronger, but Kalen was faster, landing painful, debilitating blows on joints and tendons. Cassian was slowing, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Kalen saw an opening. As Cassian lunged, Kalen ducked under his guard, his jaws aiming for the vulnerable side of Cassian's neck, a killing blow. No! The scream tore from me, raw and primal. It wasn't just a sound. It was a command, a plea, a surge of power that didn't come from my wolf, but from the very core of my being, from the bond, from my love, from the two lives inside me that needed their father. And something answered. A warmth, fierce and golden, erupted from my chest. It wasn't light, not exactly. It was a wave of pure, defiant life. It shot across the space between Cassian and me and slammed into Cassian, just as Kalen's teeth were about to connect. Cassian's body jolted. His fading strength roared back. His movements, a fraction slowed, became a blur. Instead of Kalen's jaws finding his throat, Cassian's found Kalen's foreleg. Bone crunched. Kalen shrieked, an unwolf-like sound of agony and shock. He stumbled back, his cold cunning shattered by pain and the impossibility of what had just happened. Cassian didn't hesitate. He pounced, pinning the injured alpha to the ground, his massive paw on his chest, his teeth at his throat. The fight was over. Across the valley, the battle died. Ironwood warriors, seeing Brannock down and Kalen captured, dropped their weapons. The other packs, who had never fully committed, stood frozen. Panting, bleeding, Cassian shifted back to human form. He stood over Kalen, a king victorious, but his golden eyes found mine. In them was not just triumph, but awe and a question. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. The warm, golden feeling was fading, leaving me drained. I didn't understand what I had done, but I had felt it. A power that was not of tooth and claw, but of heart and bond. The mother's roar had been heard, and it had changed everything. The aftermath was a blur of exhaustion and surreal victory. With Kaelin captured and Brannock gravely wounded, the rebel alliance collapsed like a rotten tree. The Stormcrest and Ironwood warriors surrendered. The Shadowmoor and Frostfang packs, their alphas looking pale and chastened, formally withdrew their forces and begged the king's pardon, swearing renewed fealty with trembling voices. We returned to Silverfall Castle not as fugitives or under siege, but as conquerors. But the cost was etched on Cassian's body and in the quiet shock that had settled deep inside me. Cassian's wounds were deep, but with Celene's healing magic, they would mend. It was the other wound, the invisible one, that concerned me more. The power I had unleashed on the valley, what was it? In the quiet of our chambers, with him resting in a chair by the fire, I finally asked.
"You felt it," I said, my voice small. "When I screamed. What was that?" He looked at me, his golden eyes soft in the firelight. "I felt it," he confirmed. "It was like sunlight flooding into a dark room, like strength itself was poured into my veins." He reached out, taking my hand. "It was you, Alara. It was the mate bond. And I think it was the babies." "The babies?" "Selene has been studying the old text since we returned," he said. "The ones that speak of twins not as dividers, but as magnifiers. Their power, still latent, can amplify the bonds around them. Your love, your fear for me, your will to protect, they took that pure emotion and, through our bond, turned it into a tangible force. It wasn't magic. It was love made manifest." Love made manifest. The concept was too huge, too beautiful to grasp. "So they're not destructive," I whispered, a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged lifting from my soul. "No," he said, his thumbs stroking my knuckles. "They are the opposite. They are a source of unity, of strength. The valley proved it. You proved it. The kingdom saw a queen who stood her ground, and a power that heals and defends, not destroys. The rebels' lies are ashes." But the victory had a bitter aftertaste. The following days were filled with the grim business of justice. Lord Varen and the imprisoned conspirators from the castle were tried for treason. Kaelin of Stormcrest, his leg permanently crippled, was stripped of his title and imprisoned for life for attempted regicide and the murder of his own warriors in his scheming. Brannock of Ironwood, honor-bound even in defeat, was allowed to return to his pack a broken figure, his territory placed under royal oversight. It was necessary, but it felt heavy. I saw the toll it took on Cassian to pass such judgments, even on enemies. A king's duty was not always glorious. One evening, as we reviewed the formal pledges of loyalty from the neutral packs, a new message arrived. It wasn't on parchment, but delivered orally by a nervous young messenger from a small southern pack called the Mistvale. "Your Majesties," the boy stammered, bowing so low his nose nearly touched the floor. "My Alpha, Alara's mother, she sends a message." The air in the room froze. Cassian went still beside me. I hadn't heard my mother's name since my exile. I'd assumed she'd chosen her pack and her shame over me. "What is the message?" Cassian asked, his voice neutral. The boy swallowed. "She says, the Silverfang pack is in turmoil. Elder Kael's rule is harsh. After the news of your victory at Moonstone Valley, many are questioning the old ways. They whisper that if the king's Omega mate is so powerful, perhaps twins are not a curse. My Alpha, your mother, she begs for an audience, not for herself, for the pack. She asks if the daughter she turned away would hear the plea of her people." The words hung in the air, a ghost of my past wearing the cloak of the present.
Anger, hot and immediate, rose in my chest. She had watched me beg and turned her face away. She had let me cast me out to die. How dare she ask for anything? But Cassian was watching me, waiting. This was my decision, my test, not as a queen, but as a daughter, as a person. I thought of the fear in Kale's eyes when he condemned me. I thought of the younger wolves in the Silverfang, maybe just as scared and trapped by tradition as I had been. I thought of my daughters and the world I wanted for them, a world of mercy as well as strength. "Tell your alpha," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "that the queen will receive a formal delegation from the Silverfang pack in 1 week's time. They may state their case. Judgment will follow." The messenger bowed and scurried out. The silence he left behind was profound. "You don't have to do this," Cassian said quietly. "You owe them nothing." "I know," I said, looking out the window at the stars beginning to pierce the twilight. "But this isn't about what I owe them. It's about what kind of queen I choose to be. A queen who rules only with an iron fist is no better than Kale. My power, our power," I said, placing a hand on my belly, where Nova and Celine slept, and his calm flowed through the bond, quieting the storms. "You are not who you were," he'd murmured. "You are who you chose to become." The battle for the crown was won, but the harder work, the work of building a kingdom worthy of the future sleeping within me, was just beginning. And the first test would be facing the ghosts of my past, not with a sword, but with the far more terrifying weapon of an open heart. The price of power was high, but the power of mercy, that was a mystery I was only just beginning to understand. The week before the Silverfang delegation arrived was the longest of my life. It wasn't fear of them, not anymore. It was fear of myself, of the little girl inside who still wanted her mother's approval, who still felt the sting of that averted gaze. I spent hours with Lysandra and Celine preparing not just the throne room, but my own heart. "Their alpha, your mother, will be called Lyanna," Celine said gently, reviewing protocol. "You must address her formally. It establishes distance. It establishes you as queen first." "And if she calls me daughter?" I asked, my voice tight. "Then you remind her that her daughter was left to die in the snow," Lysandra said bluntly, her eyes hard. "But you, Alara, are too clever for that. You will be gracious, you will be regal, and that will hurt her more than any accusation." Cassian was my anchor. He didn't offer advice unless I asked. He simply was there, a steady, powerful presence. At night, when nightmares of my exile tried to surface, he would place a hand on my belly where Nova and Celine slept, and his calm flowed through the bond, quieting the storms. "You are not who you were," he'd murmured. "You are who you chose to become." The day arrived. The Silverfang delegation was small, just my mother, Lyanna, Elder Kale, looking older and shrunker than I remembered, and 2 younger warriors who seemed acutely uncomfortable. They were led into the throne room, a vast space designed to humble. Cassian sat on the high throne of carved obsidian. I sat on a slightly smaller but equally imposing throne of silver birchwood, placed at his right hand. Equal. The message was intentional. They knelt. The sight of Elder Kale on his knees before me sent a cold, quiet thrill through my veins. Not vengeance, but validation. "Rise," Cassian's voice echoed. "State your purpose." It was my mother who spoke, her eyes fixed on the floor between us. "Your Majesties, we come from the Silverfang pack, humbled and seeking the crown's mercy. Our pack suffers. Under the weight of old fears, we made a grave, a horrific error." Her voice broke. She forced herself to continue, finally lifting her eyes to me. They were swimming with tears I did not trust. "We cast out a treasure. We betrayed our own blood, and we have been withering ever since. Crops fail, hunts grow scarce, sickness lingers. Our wolves are listless, as if the very heart of the pack is sick." She took a shivering breath. We believe it is because we severed a sacred bond. We broke the moon's design. We come to beg, not for forgiveness, for that is too much to ask, but for guidance, for a chance to make amends, to learn the new ways."
Elder Kale remained silent, his face ashen. The old tyrant had nothing left. Cassian glanced at me. It was my turn. I let the silence stretch, feeling the weight of the crown on my brow, the weight of my daughters in my womb. I looked not at my mother, but at the two young warriors. I saw in their eyes not guilt, but a desperate, hopeful curiosity. They were the future of that pack. "You speak of a sick heart," I said, my voice clear and cool in the vast space. "A pack's heart is its unity, its compassion, its willingness to protect its weakest, not cast them out. You did not just betray me, you betrayed the very essence of what a pack should be." My mother flinched as if struck. "I will not return to Silverfang," I continued, and a flicker of despair crossed her face. "My place is here, beside my king, ruling this kingdom, and my daughter's place is here as your future sovereigns." I let that sink in. They would bow to my children one day. "But a kingdom is only as strong as its packs. Your pack is sick, and I will not let a sickness fester on our borders." I stood then, a slight awkwardness to my movement that only emphasized my pregnancy. I walked down the 2 steps from the dais, stopping before the young warriors. "What are your names?" The first, a broad-shouldered youth, stammered, "Tarn, Your Majesty." The second, slighter, with intelligent eyes, said, "Fenna." "Tarn, Fenna. Do you believe twins are a curse?" They looked terrified. Tarn swallowed hard. I was taught they were, Your Majesty, but after Moonstone Valley, the stories we heard, we don't know what to believe anymore." "Good," I said softly. "Doubt is the beginning of wisdom. It means you are thinking for yourselves." I turned to face my mother and Kale. "Here is my judgment. Elder Kale is stripped of all authority. He will live out his days in quiet retirement, forbidden from council. Liana, you will remain Alpha, but under the direct supervision of a royal governor, a person of my choosing, who will oversee the pack's reintegration into the kingdom's laws, which prohibit exile based on birth or pregnancy." I walked back to my throne, but did not sit. I looked at them all, Queen Ilara in full. "The Silverfang pack will send 10 of its brightest young wolves, including Tarn and Fenna, to serve at Silverfall Castle for 1 year. They will learn, they will see, they will understand what strength truly looks like, and they will return to teach you." Finally, I let my gaze settle on my mother. "Mercy is not forgiveness, Liana. It is an opportunity to become better, to build something new from the ruins of the old. This is the only chance you will receive. Use it wisely." It was not the tearful reunion she might have hoped for. It was a queen's decree. My mother bowed her head, tears finally falling in earnest, but now they seemed born of a complex grief, not manipulation. "Thank you, Your Majesty. We will try to be worthy of this chance." As they were let out, the ghosts of my past finally loosened their grip. I had faced them. I had not been conquered by old pain. I had used it to build a bridge, however fragile. I felt lighter. Cassian's hand found mine. His pride was a warm sun in my mind. "You were magnificent," he whispered. "You gave them justice and a future. That is the mark of a true ruler." I placed my other hand on my belly, where Nova gave a hearty kick, as if in agreement. The past was settled. Now it was time to fully embrace the future, and the future was coming sooner than we thought. The pain began that night, not the sharp agony of Silver, but a deep, rhythmic tightening that stole my breath. Celine was summoned, her experienced hands confirming what I already knew. "The babies are ready," she said, her calm demeanor belying the excited glint in her eyes. "It's time." The royal wing, so often a place of quiet strategy, became a hive of gentle, purposeful activity. Cassian was a study in controlled panic. He insisted on being present, a request that even Celine raised an eyebrow at, but I wanted him there.
His strength through the bond was my rock. The hours blurred. The world narrowed to the cycle of pain and respite, to Celine's diding voice, to Cassian's hand gripping mine, his forehead pressed to mine during the worst peaks, our shared breath a lifeline. I drew on a strength I didn't know I had, a deep well of power that felt connected to the very moon above the castle. "It's time to push," Celine said finally, her voice firm. I pushed with everything I had, with the strength of a survivor, a mate, a queen, a mother. And then a first furious cry pierced the air, a tiny, perfect sound that broke the spell of pain. "Your daughter," Celine announced, her voice thick with emotion. She placed a tiny red-faced bundle on my chest. She had a shock of dark hair and a pair of lungs that promised great things. Nova, my bursting star. The love that crashed over me was so immense it was a new kind of pain, beautiful and overwhelming. Cassian looked at her, his face awash with a reverence so profound it brought fresh tears to my eyes. He touched her tiny fist with one trembling finger. But there was no time to rest. The contractions began again. Celine guided me. "One more, Ilara. Your Celine is waiting." The second birth was faster. With a final mighty push, another cry joined her sister's. This one was softer, a melodic wail. Celine placed her beside Nova. She was slightly smaller, with the same dark hair, but her features seemed more serene. Celine, my steady moonlight. I held them both, these two miracles, these two hearts that had beaten alongside mine through exile and war. Cassian wrapped his arms around all three of us, his large frame sheltering his entire world. The mate bond swelled, not just between him and me, but stretching tenderly to encompass the two new bright sparks of life between us. It was a completion so profound it left us speechless. We spent the next hours in a blissful, exhausted bubble. The babies were examined, pronounced perfectly healthy, and astonishingly strong. News spread through the castle, and a hushed celebratory joy seemed to permeate the very stone. It was later, as I nursed Nova while Cassian held Celine asleep, that Celine, the physician, approached, her expression strangely solemn. "Your Majesties, there is something you must see." Worried, we followed her gaze to the babies. The castle was quiet, the first true dawn beginning to lighten the sky outside the window. A sliver of early sunlight cut across the room, falling across the crib where our daughters now lay side by side, asleep. As the light touched them, something extraordinary happened. A soft silver glow began to emanate from their tiny bodies, not a fierce light, but a gentle pulsing luminescence, like moonlight made liquid. Then, as if sensing each other, their little hands, which had been lying apart, slowly moved until their fingertips touched. The moment they connected, the silver glow intensified, flowing from one to the other in a gentle loop. It pulsed softly, rhythmically, and then it expanded. A wave of warm, soothing energy washed out from them, filling the room. I felt it pass through me, a sense of profound peace, of healing, of wholeness. The last aches of childbirth faded. A small forgotten scar on my hand from the wilderness seemed to tingle and smooth. Cassian let out a soft gasp, and I saw a lingering stiffness in his shoulder from an old battle wound relax.
The glow lasted for a minute, then gently faded, retreating back into their small forms. They slept on, peaceful. Celine had tears streaming down her face. The old text, they spoke of this. The twin blessing. Their connected power isn't for destruction. It's for restoration, for healing. This is the true prophecy. Cassian and I looked at each other, overcome. Our daughters, the so-called curse, had just performed their first act as the heirs of Silverfall. They had healed. They had brought peace. In the double dawn of their birth and the new day, they had shown us the true nature of their power. It was a gift, the most beautiful gift our battered kingdom could ever receive. A year passed in a blink, measured in first smiles, first steps, and the gradual mending of a kingdom. The twin blessing, as it became known, was not a constant spectacle. It happened in quiet moments, when the girls held hands in their sleep, when they laughed together in the sun-drenched nursery. A gentle wave of well-being would ripple through the castle, plants would seem to perk up, and old injuries among the staff would ache less. It was a subtle, constant magic of harmony. The 10 young wolves from Silverfang thrived. Tarn and Fenna became fierce, loyal protectors of the nursery, their old prejudices replaced by awe and devotion. My mother, Liana, wrote monthly reports. The pack was slowly healing, embracing the new laws. She never asked for more than I gave, but her letters grew less formal, occasionally sharing a memory of my childhood. It was a fragile, distant connection, but it was no longer poisoned. The rebellion was a dark memory. The kingdom, united under the evident blessing of the twin princesses, entered an era of peace and prosperity unlike any in the chronicles. Cassian ruled with wisdom and strength, but a new softness had entered him, born from nights walking fussy babies and the joy of tiny hands grabbing his fingers. And today was the day it would all be made official. The great hall of Silverfall was packed to its vaulted ceiling with nobles from every pack in the kingdom. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting the crowd in dappled colors. The air hummed with anticipation. I stood beside Cassian at the entrance, my heart a wild drum. I wore a gown of silver and white, the royal crest embroidered over my heart. But my eyes were not on the crowd. They were on Lysandra and Celine, who each held one of our daughters. Nova, a year old, was a bundle of vibrant energy in a tiny version of my dress, her dark eyes taking everything in with fearless curiosity. Celine, in her matching gown, was calmer, observing the world with a serene, thoughtful gaze that seemed older than her years. The trumpet sounded. We walked forward, the crowd bowing in a wave of silence. We ascended the dais. Cassian took his throne. I took mine. Then Lysandra and Celine brought Nova and Celine forward and gently placed them on 2 small, exquisite thrones that had been crafted between ours. A murmur of awe swept the hall. The High Elder, a kind-faced old wolf who had supported us from the start, stepped forward. People of Silverfall, we gather not just to celebrate a year of peace, but to witness the future. By the grace of the moon and the strength of our king and queen, we have been given heirs of unparalleled promise. Today, in the sight of all, we formally recognize Princess Nova and Princess Celine as the royal heirs of the Silverfall Kingdom, blessed by the ancient twin gift of unity and healing. He turned to the girls. Nova, fascinated by his shiny medallion, reached for it. Celine simply watched, a small smile on her lips. The elder gently took their tiny hands and placed them together. As their fingers touched, the now familiar silver glow began to emanate from them, gentle but undeniable. It grew, spreading out from the dais in a warm, visible wave of light. It washed over the assembled nobles. I saw old rivals exchange startled, then softened glances. I saw shoulders relax, faces lose their lines of tension. A profound collective sigh seemed to move through the hall, followed by a deep, reverent silence. The glow subsided, leaving behind an atmosphere of pure, unified peace. Cassian stood. His voice, filled with the king's authority and a father's love, filled the space. You have seen it. You have felt it. This is not a curse. This is our destiny. A kingdom united, a future healed. My mate, Queen Alara, brought this light into our world. My daughters, your princesses, will carry it forward. This is our new covenant. Strength in unity, power in compassion. This is Silverfall. The hall erupted.
not in chaotic cheers, but in a deep, resonant roar of approval, of loyalty, of hope. Wolves knelt, not just to their king, but to their queen, and to the two little girls who represented a brighter tomorrow. Later, in the private gardens, the noise of the celebration was a distant melody. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and purples. Nova was toddling after a butterfly, with a grinning tarn shadowing her every step. Celine sat on a blanket, carefully stacking polished stones Lysandra had given her. Cassian had his arm around me, his contentment a warm blanket around my soul. I looked at my family, my fierce, loving mate, my two miraculous daughters, the loyal friends who had become pack. I thought of the long road from the frozen border, from the despair of exile, to this moment of utter, complete joy. I never imagined any of this, I whispered, leaning into Cassian. He kissed my temple. Neither did I, but I will spend the rest of my life being grateful that the moon led you to my border, and that you were strong enough to survive until I found you. Nova plopped down beside Celine, babbling something and offering her sister a slightly crushed flower. Celine took it with a solemn nod and added it to her stone tower. They leaned their heads together, a perfect picture of sibling harmony. A tiny silver shimmer danced between them for a second, making the flower petals perk up. We laughed, a sound of pure, unburdened happiness. The war was over. The past was forgiven, if not forgotten. The kingdom was secure, and our future, bathed in the gentle, healing light of our daughter's love, stretched out before us brighter than any dawn. The twins nobody wanted had become the kingdom's greatest treasure, and I, the Omega cast aside, had found my throne, my mate, and a love deeper than any prophecy. This was our happy ending, and it was only the beginning.